Hi all, welcome to my week 4 presentation titled Organizational Structure. In this week's presentation, we're going to look at some of the differences and similarities on how a private sector business is operated versus a public sector organization. And for the two comparisons, I chose to just pick a private corporation versus a city hall. Right? If you look at any private corporation out there, they're run very similarly to our local government, particularly City Hall, in how they take input and how they're operationally function internally to get some of the outputs that they need. So we'll start by looking at some of the similarities between a private organization and versus a public organization and how they are ran, basically. At the bottom, you'll see a very basic process model where the inputs come in, and we have the resources, the skills, knowledge, basically the personnel, right? That takes everything that comes in, right, and then we shoot it through output, right? Whether it be within a private organization, whether it be a manufactured product, right? Something that's tangible, right? That you can sell. Within the public sector, that could be a service, right? Inputs from the public comes in to City Hall, and you have the skilled professions, the public administrators like us. We go through the process of planning, organizing, budgeting, and then the output would be the service provided to the constituents. On the bottom right, you'll see HRM, Human Resource Management. Both organizations, whether private or public, has a human resource management process, right? First we have the employees. They need proper training. They need specific goals and objectives, recruitment, termination, and sort of rewards, incentives. Both public and private has that, right? We all see that on a daily basis. And there are many differences that you can pick out, whether it be cost, planning, skills, knowledge. But I believe the two main fundamental differences is profit versus non-profit, and uh, human resource management. Those are some of the big differences between a private and public organization. Within a private organization, it's very profit driven, right? We get inputs. The reason I say I spent most of my career in the private sector. Right? We do research, development, marketing to get what is needed, what is marketable, what we can make a profit on, right? And if it's within a manufacturing process, then we would design, and test and implement, plan, and get everything ready, and do additional marketing and so on and so forth. And the output would be the product that is for profit, right? It's very straightforward. Just as long as we make money, right? And on the human resource side, it's also very profit driven, right? If it's not feasible for a private organization to hire X amount of employees or provide a certain amount of training based off of the budget that they have, then that would be pretty much cut, right? But for profit, you actually do get a lot more leeway than non-profit in the public sector, right? In the public sector, a lot of the inputs, or actually not a lot, but all the inputs are from the public, right? The constituents. They demand, some type of service, and City Hall or the local government would be pressed to come up with a solution, right, for that service. However, because it's nonprofit and they are using public funds, they have to be very careful, efficient, cost effective, right? They can't just blindly go and say, well, we have the money, let's do it, right? There's lots to consider, finance, planning. I mean, even down to human resource management, right? The sort of fundamental differences there, I believe, are, you know, uh, I believe, the hiring process and the termination process, right? Hiring and termination in the private sector is very straightforward, right? If it's at will, we hire you for a specific skill, right? We know based off of your qualifications, right? And there's a little bit of testing there, which is a little bit similar to the public sector. But when you get on, you're at will, right? If you don't do your job, you're fired. Very straightforward, right? In the public sector, they're starting to get towards more um, at will, but generally, it's not, right? They have to follow due process, right? When they even the hiring process is a lengthy, you know, process in itself, right? Whether it be testing, going through the different bureaucratic processes, and takes months to get on, right? And then once you get on, you're basically on this long probation period, right? Just to see how well you do. Now, depending on the probation period, once you get over that, then you're pretty much set, right? And any kind of termination process would need to follow due process, right? They have to find evidence of the wrongdoing, and basically, it's an investigation, right? And they have to, find other cooperating evidence and so on and so forth, which actually costs a lot of money, right? And it's not very efficient, but you see some of the contrast, right? Is, you know, how can we sort of merge some of the good things from the private sector into the public sector that actually does work? And as I mentioned in the previous slide, there are efficient practices in the private sector that can be applied in the public sector. We do see some of that now where, as I mentioned, a lot of organizations in the public sector are going towards at will, right? It's a lot, it saves a lot of time, right? It's more efficient and more cost effective. If you're hired to do a job, you do the job, and if you don't, then you get let go, right? That saves a lot of time, a lot of hassle, a lot of money. However, I don't believe that government should be run exactly like a business. As we've seen in this past week's reading, that the biggest thing is the wicked problems, right? The dilemmas that we face that are brought to us by the public, right? In the private sector, it's very straightforward, right? It's for profit. We make a product, we sell it. If we make money, everybody's happy, right? In the public sector, we have issues, right? Like I mentioned before, we are providing a service that the constituents are demanding, right? And so these services, as we have read, it's not a broad solution, right, that we can provide, right? One solution for a group of demographics may not be the right solution for the next, right? And it could possibly create more problems, right? And so in that aspect, I believe there shouldn't be a strict sort of business mentality in the public sector because we do have to consider a lot of things, whether it be public finance, the wicked problems, going towards homelessness, poverty. There's no clear right or wrong, right, or good or bad there. So in closing, in my personal experience in the private sector, I believe there are a lot of very efficient practices that can be applied in the public sector. However, I think we need to be very careful on how we apply those methods, and we can't take everything from the private sector and turn government into business. We've seen how much that's failed in the past. In regards to different areas, right? Whether it be the auto industry or if you want to go back further in other industries where government took over and it just, you know, you know, crap hits the fan, right? Because it's too broad, right? Government is meant to, address people, right? And the private sector is addressing basically money, right? And I don't think you can put that together and be very efficient and compassionate, right, at the same time. So on that note, I'll just leave it to you to decide, whether there are practices that can be implemented, or if we need to strictly keep private practices away from the public sector.